the Radio Forest Podcast.
Hey, Forrest. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's been a couple of years since I've talked to you. I lived in Topeka for a while, and honestly, there are still some people there that have White Clover memorabilia. I'm surely you guys see that when you go through.
Oh, yeah. The White Clover stuff it's a treasure to the very dedicated Kansas fans because there's not a whole lot of it.
I think there was a guy there that was telling me he had like an amplifier that had like a White Clover logo on it. I didn't get to see it, but that's what he had told me.
Yeah, I believe that. 'Cause we had, when we first got, it was probably stenciled on there, for road crew.
But you guys are heading back there. I know you're playing Manhattan. You've just announced a lot of tour dates. You've got that brand new live album out. It sounds great, and I know you had some co-producing on that. What is that on the recent live album, or was that on the Absence of Presence that you did some co-producing?
Well, we were on both, but on the live album because we record every night, and so we probably had 100 shows recorded of the Point of No Return tour. 2019 was going to be our busiest year of all time, and we'd been doing the Point tour. Then COVID came, and we went home for a year and a half. We knew that at some point in time we were going to put out the Point of No Return Live and Beyond. So in that time, we thought, well, we've got all this stuff in the can. Let's just do the record now. It's keeps us busy anyway. So it was an unusual project because Chad Singer, our front of house engineer, and he's been our engineer in the studio. He did it all basically at his home on his laptop, and then would submit, all the mixes. We'd fill in. And Chad would select which version. Okay, for Dustin, when this night was the best night, and then we would go through the mixes and go through and make little changes. So it was all done via Dropbox, basically. So as I would listen in my studio, make suggest changes and etc. And so instead of sitting side by side in a room doing it, it makes it a little bit tedious because it just takes longer. Okay, goose the vocal right here. Well, to do that, it takes a day to get the coordination between all of us to see the message and to do it and hear it again. So it was a different way of doing things, but we had the time, being off for a year and a half. So, but I think it really came out well. It really sounds like us, and that's why we really wanted Chad mixing the whole thing, because that's what he does. He's the guy out front. He knows what we sound like live out front, so who would be better than to capture that?
When you do producing, in addition to songwriting and playing guitar, do you get paid a little bit more for the producing work, or how does that work? When you've been on every album Kansas has released, do you get a bigger cut of that for the work that you do?
Well, Phil and I are in what I would call the final count room, where after everything is paid, we pay ourselves. Phil and I do that because we want to maintain control of the project. But no, there's no salary that we take for that part of it. For us, like, say, Chad, a front of house man, he spent a lot of time going through all these different versions of each song, picking the best 5 in his opinion, then submitting it to us. So he was doing most of the lead work. He was paid a producer fee. Phil and I get the title, but we don't. It seems pointless to pay ourselves with our own money.
So for this live album and also the last one from 2020, Absence of Presence, if your role was exactly the same, in theory, your cut's the same. Like if you did more producing work on the live album, that doesn't change what you see in the end. It's still the same. You're like, well, I'm in Kansas after everybody's paid. Then Phil Ehart and I, then we take our cut.
Yeah, it's and realistically, hard product doesn't really sell. In the late 70s, early 80s, you could sell hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of actual product. Now, it's not even a tenth of. It's all downloads and streaming. Other than collectors and hardcore fans, nobody buys hard product anymore. So the success of an album today, outside of just a very few people, it's not a tenth of what it was in its heyday. There's no financial incentive to record an album. The bread and butter is live performance. That's where we've always traditionally got paid, except back in the glory days when there were actual record companies, record stores, CBS Record Club, all that kind of stuff. None of that exists anymore. So there is no revenue stream from any of that. So now we make records for the love of doing it, not for the paycheck.
I saw somebody reference your band the other day, and I wanted to share that with you. James Hetfield, the lead singer of Metallica, was talking about hanging out with a friend rather recently. And let's listen to some music. They busted out a Kansas record and threw that on and listened to Carry On Wayward Son on vinyl. And I know Metallica has covered Kansas Live when they played Kansas City, as have Anthrax and Gwar. Now, I find it...
And the Foo Fighters.
And the Foo Fighters. Yeah, I find it funny, like the bands that you think would be inspired by Kansas, it's pretty self-evident. But when I think of bands like Anthrax and the Foo Fighters and Metallica's always talked about the new wave of British heavy metal, bands like Saxon and Motorhead. And then when Hetfield talked about how big of a Kansas fan he was when that original stuff came out, that kind of like set me back. I was like, oh man, I didn't think about how many genres you guys were influencing, because you talked about like when you sold those albums, the number of copies you sold in the stadium tours. Have you already known that stuff, or is it ever a surprise to you? You're like, well, I didn't know Metallica's listening to Kansas.
Well, it's understandable, and of course it's always a compliment. But people think, oh, Kansas, and here's what they do, and there's always a misconception. People go, gosh, I wish I was a fly on the wall when they were creating Left Overture. No, you don't. You don't want to meet your heroes ever, and you never want to be in that room. It's not what you think. We're not a bunch of wizards sitting around in a candlelit room conceiving of this concept. We're just a bunch of guys that was from Topeka that were putting something together, and we kind of edged it along in this direction. We're just normal people, and it's not as deep as people think as far as the concept of putting together. It's actually just working musicians doing what they do. And to finish that, so you wouldn't think that we were fans of Sam and Dave and the Righteous Brothers, Motown stuff, all of that. That's what we grew up on, are those things. And so those are influences that still influence my playing, which would be different than if I was only influenced by British prog. Phil and I play very heavy-handed, play hard, play loud, a lot of balls, and that's that more of a Mitch Ryder in the Detroit Wheels approach to the rhythm section, which gives Kansas its power. If our influences were more from the early British prog, it would be a little bit lighter. And so we all draw from where we started in those early influences, and we just build upon that. So it's not unusual that they were listening to the music of their time and influenced by it, just like we were, like everybody is.
Did you ever run into or have a chance to meet Jeff Beck?
I have not. I know nothing about him personally. I don't know if he's just a great guy or kind of a prick. I have no idea. In my mind, he's a kind of quiet and a bit shy and maybe slightly aloof, being a bit British. I can say that because I'm British too. My mother was from England, war bride. And so, but I just don't know. I just think he's probably the most expressive guitar player there is. I mean, you can line up 100 guitar players and play this, and you will pick Jeff Beck out every time. He just has his own voice.
So, Rich, when you head back to Manhattan, do you go for KU or K-State for basketball?
Oh, well, I can say this on this radio because you're not broadcasting in Kansas, but I'm a KU fan.
What about football?
Well, since it's funny, KU football, all the people that have season tickets, they go for the tailgating because they know by halftime it's going to be 30-0, the other team. That way they can get out to the parking lot to the party quicker. Where K-State traditionally has had some pretty good football teams. I just kind of concentrate really on Kansas sports. To me, it is KU basketball, and I kind of ignore the rest.
What about the Ichabods? You ignore them? They're out?
Well, I have no reference to them as far as on Saturday afternoon, the Ichabods aren't on TV here in North Carolina.
That's absolutely true. Yeah, congratulations, by the way, on your recent move. Again, it's Rich Williams from Kansas, and the album just came out last year, The Absence of Presence. Rich, it's a pleasure to talk to you, man. Thank you for the time today, and we can't wait to see you in May.
Looking forward to it. Can't wait to get back out on the road.